Good morning, students. This is the third session on the chapter planning. So, continue with the topic list. The next topic of discussion is will be limitations or drawbacks of planning. So, please write down next topic, limitations or drawbacks of planning. So in the last session, we discussed the different advantages or importance of planning as a function of management, what sort of advantages an organization derives from sound planning that we discussed in detail in the last class. So let us now go through the limitations or drawbacks of planning, the disadvantages which planning can impose on an organization. Open the bracket from the first line. Within brackets, you write down the page numbers of your textbook, limitations or drawbacks of planning. See your textbook and write down the page numbers of your textbook beside the topic. Then open the bracket from the first line and underline limitations of planning. There are several limitations of planning. Some of them are inherent in the process of planning, while others arise due to the shortcomings in the techniques of planning and in the planners themselves. So there can be two types of, limitations or drawbacks of planning. One are inherent limitations or drawbacks. That means planning itself comprises or consists of these drawbacks. Planning cannot be done setting aside these limitations or drawbacks. They are inherent to planning, these limitations. And there are other external limitations or drawbacks which arise due to the faulty techniques of planning and in the wrong judgment of the planners themselves. So these limitations of planning are discussed below. Point number 1, costly process. Please underline costly process. So planning is a very expensive process. It takes an organization has to hire the services of professional planners, professional managers with proper amount of expertise and experience for developing the plans of the organization. The organization has to collect a lot of data from the market for making proper analysis, for developing the alternative courses of action. Unless proper information is gathered from the market, alternative courses of action cannot be formulated. Then proper analysis has to be done for identifying and selecting the best possible course of action. So for doing all these tasks, a lot of money has to be spent. So planning is a costly process. Money, time and effort have to be spent in forecasting, collection of information, evaluation of alternatives, etc., which I have just told you. So services of experts may be necessary to select the best and most economical source of action for the enterprise. And these services, once they are hired, for selecting the best and most economical course of action for the enterprise, so they have to be paid a lump sum amount. So planning should be economical. That is, the cost of planning should not exceed the gains expected from it. However, the management has always to keep in mind that planning must be economical as much as possible, so that the cost which is incurred on planning does not surpass the benefits which are expected from it. Then it will be of no use. Rather, it has to be just the opposite. The results, the outcomes of the plans must be much, much greater, much, much more than the cost which is incurred in the planning process. So management must exercise intelligent judgment to balance the expenses of preparing the plans against the benefits derived from them. So management will have to make a conscious effort and exercise its intelligent judgment to see how much of expenses are incurred in preparing the plans and against the amount of benefits which are expected to be derived from them. So planning is useful only when its benefits are more than its cost. Planning only becomes useful and worthwhile when its benefits, expected benefits, are much, much more than the amount of cost incurred in it. So that is the first drawback of planning. It is quite an expensive process. Number 2, time consuming. Developing sound plans for an organization is a long time consuming process. So the time which may be consumed for developing plans for an organization may be so much that in that process of developing the plans, the business may lose out on good opportunities. It can lose out on business opportunities and incur heavy amount of losses. So underline time consuming. Considerable time is required for collection. Why is planning so very time consuming? Because a lot of time is required for collecting, analyzing and interpreting the information which are required for planning. Planning is based on forecasting and proper collection of information. So a lot of time is spent for collection of data and information which will be required for the planning. A lot of information, a lot of time is spent for analyzing and interpreting these information for the sake of planning. So therefore, planning is not practicable during emergencies and crises when on-the-spot decisions are required to be taken. So therefore, planning becomes unimportant. Planning becomes impracticable in situations of emergencies and crisis when on-the-spot spontaneous decisions are required to be taken. So that is itself a limitation of planning. So planning does not work in case of emergencies or crisis when on-the-spot decisions are to be taken. In such situations, the existing plans may have to be abandoned. In case of an new type of an emergency, a new type of a crisis, the existing plan will not work because it is a new type of a situation. So in that case, that plan which has been developed by spending so much of time and money becomes useless. So that is itself a drawback of planning. So planning may cause delay, and this a long time which is taken for developing plans. This can cause unnecessary delay in decisions and actions. The long time which is spent for developing plans can cause unnecessary delay in taking decisions and in taking actions. Any delay caused by planning may deprive the business of a profitable opportunity. The business can lose out on a profitable opportunity because the plans were not ready and a lot of time was taken for developing those plans. The third limitation is rigidity. Underline it. Once the plans are made, although we say that sound plans or good plans must have sufficient rooms for incorporating changes as and when required, plans must be made as flexible as possible. But the truth is, once plans are made in great detail, once the methods and procedures of doing work have been described and explained in detail as a plan, it becomes very difficult later for the members who are executing the plan to incorporate changes within the plan. Workers and employees and other members of the staff will have to stick to the framework of that plan for executing their jobs. So plan by nature is rigid. It cannot be changed very quickly. So too much of adherence to planning and too much of detailed planning brings about rigidity in the process of work. Even if it is required, it will not be easy for the organization to shift from one method of working to another because they were following a detailed plan of executing a particular job. So once plans are formulated, people tend to strictly adhere to them irrespective of changes in the environment. Once plans have been developed, members of the organization become acquainted and habituated in executing their tasks by following the methods and procedures which have been laid down in the plan. And therefore, they become irresponsive of changes taking place in the environment. They care less of noticing what changes are taking place in the environment, and they don't remain responsive to such changes. They don't welcome these changes. Employees become more concerned with observing the programs and procedures rather than achieving the goals. Employees, after a certain point in time, their focus shifts on how to execute their job by following the programs and procedures which are laid down in the plan. So they just become machines. They just become, programmed robots. They try to do their work in the same way, following the pattern, following the program, following the method which has been described in the plan. And after a certain point in time, they lose the focus of attaining the objective or goal of the organization. Even if that plan which they are following is not giving the desired result, they keep on sticking to that plan and keep on executing the work by following the method or program which has been explained in that plan. They are reluctant to deviate from. These employees, once they become accustomed to doing work according to a programmed schedule, so they become reluctant, they become unwilling to deviate from the plans due to fear of criticisms. They fear that if they do something which is not laid down within the scope of the plan, so they may be criticized by the management. Thus, detailed planning may create a rigid framework in the organization. It may discourage individual initiative and creativity. So that is a danger of planning. Number 4, lack of accuracy, underline lack of accuracy. Planning is based on forecasts which are estimates about the future. So planning, as you know, that has been discussed before, that planning is developed on the basis of forecasts. What are forecasts? Predictions of the events which are going to arise in future, which are made on the basis of scientific methods, are called forecasts. Now, if these forecasts are themselves inaccurate, improper, and if thereby plans are developed on the basis of these inaccurate forecasts, so these plans will yield very less results. It will not going to give the desired results to the organization. So planning is based on forecasts which are estimates about the future. When the forecasts themselves are wrong, inaccurate, these plans become misleading. They will become misleading plans. They will give the wrong results. The degree of inaccuracy increases as the plan period increases. So more the planning period, the more will be the element of inaccuracy in the planning process. That is why organizations prefer to prepare plans for a short term, maybe for the next 1 year at the most. Because it is of no use preparing a plan for the coming 5 years or for the coming 10 years for such a long term. Because over the next 5 years or 10 years, a lot of things are going to change in the business environment. So therefore, it is of no use preparing the plan of a long period in advance. Rather, plans should be prepared for short periods, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year at the most. So this is because distant future can be predicted with lesser accuracy. Bias or prejudice of the planners, lack of reliable data, and errors of management, errors of judgment also reduce the accuracy of planning. So these are the inherent incapabilities of the planners, the managers. Okay. Planners, sometimes they have their own prejudices, their own notions. Then there can be lack of reliable data, lack of reliable information. They can make errors in their judgment. So all these things together will reduce the accuracy of the plans. Therefore, blind reliance on plans may become dangerous. A plan has been prepared by the management, so everyone will have to follow it blindly, and that plan must be treated as the Bible of the organization. Okay? But that is not always correct. Number 5, a false sense of security. This a rigid plan develops a false sense of security among the employees of the organization. When the employees see that management has already prepared a detailed plan in which every work, every task of every employee has been defined very specifically, so they get a feeling that if we execute our work, our tasks by following what has been laid down in the plan, everything will work out very well. We will get the desired result, the organization will grow, it will expand, and our career in this organization will also flourish. So that is a fallacy, a false notion. It is not going to happen always. Detailed planning may create a feeling among the employees that everything has been taken care of. Everything, every possible factor has been taken care of while developing the plans. So strictly following the plan will always produce the good results and always lead to an improvement in the prospect of the organization and in the prospect of personal prospects of the employees as well. They may consider work as per plans as fully satisfactory. They may fail to improve performance and may confine themselves to fulfilling the requirements of the plans. So even if when the employees are made to work strictly according to the planning schedule, there is a possibility that very efficient employees can lose their level of efficiency. Even if they are capable of giving more, they are capable of producing more, giving more result, they will not give that effort to produce better result, because they will find that by giving 50% of our effort, if we can achieve the targets which are being laid in these plans, that why should we give our full effort? So this may cause or lead to a decrease in the level of efficiency of the efficient employees. So that is another danger of planning. So they may fail to improve their performance and may confine themselves, restrict themselves to fulfilling the requirements of the plans. Following a predetermined course of action in a dynamic environment might be very risky and unprofitable. There are psychological barriers also, underline it. People get accustomed to attitudes, beliefs and traditions, and they resist change in established practices and behavior. So while following these rigid plans, people over here means the employees of the organization, after following the plan for a few months, they get accustomed to the attitudes, beliefs and traditions, and they resist changes in established practices and behavior. So according to McFarland, the principal psychological barrier is that executives, like most people, have more regard for the present than for the future. Once the employees get habituated and accustomed in doing a particular job by following a particular method as laid down in the plan, then even if it is required in future that even a better method is introduced of executing that particular plan, a better way of doing the work, is identified, is discovered for doing the same set of work. So the employees who have already got habituated to that particular method, old method of doing the work, will not welcome a better way of doing the same task. They will try to stick to the old method of doing the work as laid down in the plan. And they will resist changes. They will not welcome change even if it is necessary for the betterment of the organization, for increasing the efficiency or for increasing the productivity. So these are the dangers of plans. So according to McFarland, the principal psychological barrier, the whole thing is a mental barrier, a psychological barrier of the employees of the organization. The principal psychological barrier is that executives, like most people, have more regard for the present than for the future. The present is not only more certain than the future, it is also more desirable. Resistance to change is a commonly experienced phenomenon in the business world. In the business world, often it has been seen that employees, workers, they resist changes, all sorts of changes, even if the changes are required for the betterment. Planning often implies changes which the executives would like to ignore, hoping they would not materialize. External limitations, another drawback of planning. Changes in business environment restrict the freedom of planning for the management. Changes in technology, changes in government policies, legislative enactments, these are all changes which continuously take place in the external macro environment of a business organization. Changes in the technological environment, changes in the the government policies, and changes in the legal environment, industrial unrest in the country, etc., are more important external limitations on planning. So if these changes keep on happening in the external environment, then the plan which has been prepared in advance becomes less effective in the light of this changing circumstances in the environment. Management has little or no control over this external environment, which you have learnt in chapter 1, business environment. So when the external forces of the environment keep on changing, like the political environment, technological environment, legislative environment, etc., legal environment, management of one particular organization does not have any control over these changes, over the changes taking place in the external environment. So management has little or no control over these external events, which greatly hamper managerial planning in an enterprise. So when these forces and factors in the external environment of a business organization keep on changing rapidly, the plans which have been prepared by the business organization already become ineffective. They cannot produce the desired results. In a fast changing environment, planning may have little practical value. So close the bracket after this. So these are the limitations, drawbacks, or dangers of planning. So too much of reliance in planning, following the plans blindly, may cause danger for an organization. So I will be ending my session over here. In the next session on this chapter, I am going to discuss a very important topic, which is the different steps involved in the planning process. Thank you.